What about the supporters, people on the side of the road, volunteers? Any observations there?
Dude, I can't. We got we people talk about it, right? They'll be like, "Hey, people are on the side of the road. They're very welcoming. They're supporting you." Okay, that is like underselling it
Yeah,
to umpteenth degree because it's just wild, like it's so cool, like in the middle of the night seeing some dude in a lawn chair kicking it and we ride by, he's like, all right, like, okay. Or
yeah,
like that I just thought was so fantastic and I can't sing the praises of that enough. It was so amazing and
agreed.
beautiful.
Today we have Fergus Liam, who completed PBP in 2023. He's originally from Dixon, California, but now lives in San Francisco. Fergus has been around bikes most of his life. He's raced, been a messenger, worked in bike shops, and is now employed by Ritchey as the US marketing manager for the last 10 years. Fergus, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Okay,
Thanks for having me. I'm really flattered you invited me.
cool. Okay, I always like to start with this question. What does PBP mean to you?
Damn, that's a good question that you prepped me for, and I should have thought about
It's
more.
almost like you didn't do the homework, Fergus, but keep going. Okay, all right.
Par for the course. Before I did it, it meant something completely different than what it means to have completed it. And I feel like this might be true for a lot of people. When I first heard about it, it was like this fantasy of joyfully rolling through the French countryside, which that's like 1% of it. Having completed it, to me, it's like this kind of this like little secret that I have with like 8,000 other people that completed it with me. That's like, hey, remember that really like crazy kind of, excuse my language, fucked up thing that we did?
Yeah,
Is that weird?
yeah,
And so I really love it. And sometimes people will, like I was just on a trip and some friends, they would introduce me and say, oh, here's Fergus, he did PvP. And people go, oh, and they'd say, oh, he did it in 66 hours. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess,
yeah,
which isn't like horribly fast, but it's fast enough, right?
yeah,
So, um, yeah, so it's this wonderful shared experience.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think is the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, like it's this weird little corner of the biking landscape, isn't that right? That if you know, you know. Otherwise,
E-
you don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do you remember what it was like once you got to that finish line? How did you feel?
Awful. I felt
Okay.
so horrible. I was miserable, and I
Okay.
went through this whole journey, and um, I'd been warned about this. Rob kind of warned us that like you'll go through this like wave of emotions. And I finished, and I was like, "Fuck, I'm never touching a bicycle again." And then I stumbled through to shovel food in my mouth and like drink a beer. And I was like, "Yeah, that was pretty cool." And then took a nap, and I woke up, and I was like, "We're doing it again." So,
Humans, so weird, aren't they? They're messed up. Yeah,
yeah.
that's funny. Well, maybe let's take a step back about your background in biking. You know, why do you ride? How does it make you feel, etc.
Yeah, the start of it was, you know, my siblings and I are pretty far apart in age. We're each 6 years apart. So in a lot of ways, I grew up alone, and I I remember teaching myself how to ride. Just there's this bike that like this red BMX bike, and I would just dutifully every day like push off and try to pedal and get scared and drop it. And
Yeah,
eventually one day I rode around in the front yard, and I was just like, it was such an amazing feeling. And it's this beautiful thing that I think everyone that learns how to ride has this moment of. And I've been like chasing the dragon ever since, as it were.
yeah,
Um, and since then, I was just obsessed with bikes. Like I remember, Saturday morning watching cartoons, and then cartoons would end, and then dating myself, but ABC Wide World of Sports would come on, and they showed everything back then, and they showed the Tour de France. And
Wow.
I remember, it was like Greg's first year winning, and I remember watching him racing and the battle that he had, and I just have this like iconic image of him riding down the Champs, and the camera's next to him, and he's just hauling oats, and it was just such a beautiful thing. And then um, I just was so obsessed, and I don't know why, but we had a set of drop bars in the barn, and so I
Yeah.
ran out like somehow banged off the riser bars of my BMX and put drop bars on it
Yeah.
and rode that around and realized that was ridiculous and put the other bars back.
That's funny.
And then one day Quicksilver came on, and I'd always been obsessed with San Francisco, and I was like, whoa, people get paid to ride their bike and deliver stuff in the city. This seems cool. And that those things kind of like shaped my trajectory. And I'm stubborn, I guess. And so after college, I got a job as a bike messenger because I didn't know what to do. Like most people don't know what to do when they
Yeah.
graduate. Um, I did that for almost too long, and then I knew I wanted to stay working with bikes, so um, I started working in bike shops, and then got the job at Ritchey. And you know, through everything that I've done in my life, my bike has been there, one way or another. From getting too drunk at parties and realizing like, oh, walking's really hard, but I know I can ride home, which is a horrible
I
mistake.
know.
But I don't know why I could ride better than I can walk.
Yeah.
To feeling just overwhelmingly elated and like, I want to go on a bike ride, or
Yeah. Yeah.
something's got to work out in my head. I'm going to ride a bike, and so it's always been there since I was a little kid. Bikes have been there.
And Fergus, do you ever get burnt out? Because you've had a very long relationship with bicycles in general.
Yeah, absolutely. When when I got into racing bikes fairly late. I started when I was 27, and like that pressure of training and being fit and feeling like I'm overweight, even though I'm not. It's
Yeah.
like there. Racing really can like exacerbate insecurity, and the little fleeting moments of joy you have are just like, well, gotta get ready for the next one. Um, and to be honest, just having like dealing with depression sometimes like it's impossible. And as much as it's a therapeutic tool, it's also one of those things where it can be just as punishing. Like I I remember I went on this ride, and I was kind of dealing with some stuff, and I thought, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about microdosing, but I was
Yeah. No, of
microdosing some
course.
mushrooms.
Yeah. Macrodosing, the whole lot. Go for it. I don't
I
care.
love it, right?
Yeah.
So it's enough to like turn the lights on in a room, right? Not to wonder what my hands are doing.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm on this ride, and just all these negative thoughts came in. I was like struggling up this hill. I was riding up Highway 1 between Pelican Inn and Stinson. It was super foggy, and I couldn't see more than 200 feet or something. So I pulled over on the side of the road. I was like, well, maybe I'm bonking. I ate a bar. I was like, this doesn't help. And I kept riding. It was super gray. And then there's a fire recently, and all of a sudden the whole landscape turned bright pink.
Okay.
And I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And I realized it was the fire retardant, that they like
The
dropped,
drop. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's this totally surreal experience. And I'm just like fighting through all these like kind of visual inputs and like feeling just crappy. And I was like, you know what? I'm going home. And I just turned around, went home, hung up the bike, and just was like, I'm going to take a couple days. Um, it's a long way to answer your question, but yeah, I think burnout is real,
Yeah.
and getting older and feeling like I'm losing time is also a struggle. So anytime I get injured or sick, or if I get like a little bit of fitness and then I get set back, it gets exacerbated.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
it's hard.
I get the sense, like me, you have this thing in your life, bikes, right? And it'll always be there. But there are times that maybe I should step away for a while, okay? Because I want to make sure it's always there.
Yeah.
But on the whole, it's an extremely positive thing, I believe.
Mm. Yeah.
Cool. Let's start. Let's talk about PBP because that's in the title of the podcast, okay?
Oh yeah.
How did you originally hear about PBP?
Uh, I told this story recently, but and I kind of love it. But um, when I was 20 or something, like so this would be 2000, right? Um, Rivendell was a relatively young company, and you could still buy parts from. Not that you couldn't buy parts, you could still buy Suntour parts from
Yeah,
them. And so I was buying a set of new old stock Superbie cranks from Rivendell. And, at that time, I just really coveted the Atlantis. I thought it was such a cool frame, um, and I couldn't afford that. And anyway, when you bought stuff from Rivendell, they would send you a copy of the Rivendell Reader. And that issue happened to talk about PvP. And they featured this gal in the back who later became a friend of mine, Kathleen, and she talked about doing PvP, and I was like, wow, this is cool, and
yeah,
and so that's where like I said earlier, this image of like wistfully rolling to the French countryside,
yeah,
and then I became a messenger maybe a couple years after that, or a year later, and this dude Joel Metz, who Joel's he's so badass, and he had this custom bike that, to an untrained eye, you'd think, oh, it's just like a rigid mountain bike, but really it was modeled after the French paperboy bikes. And Joel's a huge proponent of doing brevets and PvP. And the way he sold it to us was it's like a really long alley cat. There's checkpoints, and you get through
yeah,
it, and you go as fast or slow as you want. And he talked a friend of mine and I into doing a brevet. Turns out it was the Lighthouse brevet that they now
yeah.
changed to Pierce Point, right? Um, I had no idea what I was doing, and so that was the longest ride I ever done, and golly, I suffered. And I remember, you know, finally getting to the finish and just going to the taqueria, getting a burrito, eating that, then sleeping for the next 12 hours. Just like,
That's funny.
oh my God. But yeah, so I saw Grant had made just this last, or at this last show, and I told him, hey, you're one of the inspirations for PvP. Like, because of the Rivendell Reader, I was inspired, in a very Grant way. He was like, oh, thank you. And I happened
Yeah,
to see Joel the same day, and I told him the same thing, like, hey, thank you.
yeah,
Both of you inspired me to do this thing, and
yeah.
I owe them a lot of gratitude.
Just back to the original 200. What had been your longest ride before then?
I don't know, maybe 20 miles or
Oh
something.
my God, really?
But yeah, but when you're a messenger,
Yes, I know. Yeah,
you ride all day, and so it's little spurts, but it adds up. And so, at the time I was riding on longboard for Western Messenger, so it was estimated we did about 50 miles a day, you
yeah,
know, and it's okay, but
yeah.
nothing like that.
And Fergus, do you remember like what it was like just being on part of that subculture, the randonneur ring people? Were they a little bit different?
Oh yeah, they're kooks, I was like,
Kooks.
and they looked at me and they're like, "You must be a bike messenger," because
Yeah,
I didn't have bibs or nothing. I
yeah,
wore my work clothes, so it was a pair of cut off shorts, and I had an old wool jersey, and they're like, I don't know, it's kind of this thing. And I remember looking at their bikes and thinking like, oh, that thing still rolls, like a lot of like kind of classic Randur bikes back
yeah,
then.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. Since we're talking about bikes, maybe a slight detour. tell me about like the characteristics since you've already done a PBP. Like, what is important in a bicycle for PBP? And also, I ask that because I know you were involved with the development of the Ritchey Montebello. Did I get that right?
Hmm. Yeah, that's
So
right.
tell me more about that.
Well, it's really a two-parter, right? So like the fascinating thing about PBP and what I love about it is you get the broad range of people and the broad range of bikes from like, I remember being on the train out to Rambouillet and there's a dude with like a Cervelo P4 and he was trying to get, like, I don't know, 20 hours or something bonkers.
Yeah.
And then I saw people on like kind of Leroyka style bikes for
Yes.
I was like, man, I'm surprised he made it to the station. So what's important for a bike for PvP? I think it's important that you're able to sit on it for a long time and it rolls forward.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I like it. Okay.
But I had this very like not rigid definition, but like kind of like a specific idea when I was coming into the Montebello and things that I thought were useful, right? So I think useful is maybe the best way to look at it. Um, Based on experience, based on what I saw most people riding, that was a 700C bike, even though like the purists will tell you that it should be 650B. Um, it, fenders were smart. I wanted to have dynamo on it. 'Cause for me, that was really useful on long rides. Um, and that it can clear a tire that's relatively comfortable, so a 36 is to me, again, everyone has their preference, but I'd ridden a 30 all the way up to a 38 for brevets, and I found that for me I really like riding on a like 34 to 35C tire, so it's just the right combination of fast and cushion. um, so yeah, when after doing all these rides and coming back and saying, like I think this is what the bike should have. Those are kind of the core elements, and then the geometry kind of unfolded from there. Looking for something that could be a little sportier in the handling, but a
Yeah.
little bit more stack, so you're kind of not bent over as much. Um,
Yeah.
and some other kind of Ritchie signature items like our straight steer tube and a 27 tube post all added up into this bike that I think came out really, really well.
That's so cool. And like the industry as a whole, is there sort of a trend towards randonneering type bikes or characteristics of those types of bikes, or you tell me?
Um, I get a kick out of the definitions that people want, or it's a chicken and the egg, because,
Yeah.
some of the public will say, you know, bike industry is forcing this down our throat. And there's also some things where people want to be told what a bike is supposed to do. And, when we launched the Montebello, I was careful to say it's not just for brevets because not everyone knows what that is. If
Yeah.
you tell them what a brevet is, they're going to be like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. That sounds awful. Um, and so I kind of brought back this term that is we used in the bike shop. It's an endurance road bike, right? Like
Okay.
you can ride it as long or as short as you want, but it's not a race bike. It's just a bike. So I think that the industry, I think some part of the industry is realizing that selling Porsches to people who want a Corolla or let's say a Honda Accord um, isn't longevity. And I think people realize like, oh, do I want the same bike that Matthew Vanderpool won, Milan
Yeah.
San Remo on?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe I want the bike that you know Russ from Pathless Pedal did his favorite, long distance off road ride on.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, it's interesting because, I watched that as well, the path less pedaled. And like his whole shtick is we're designing bikes or selling bikes based on the Tour de France or the one day classics or whatever. Doesn't make any sense. There's 95% of other people who just want bikes for very kind of normal reasons. So I definitely think there seems to have been a sea change in biking in general and how they're being sold. Cool.
Yeah.
Your first PBP, how did you kind of formulate a strategy? How are you going to ride it? That kind of thing.
Uh, kind of a few different things. So I had done the two 600s that I had done previous. Did the Santa Cruz 6, and that one I was sailing on. That one I
Okay.
finished, I think in 21 hours or something.
Wow, that's incredible.
I lucked out with a pretty massive tailwind going down to San Ardo, so that
Okay.
helped a lot. And then once when the sun set, the wind died down, so it wasn't totally abysmal coming home. Um, and that one was kind of perfect conditions. So I thought, "Ah, I'm never going to get that lucky again." And sure enough, the Mendocino 6 was probably
Yeah,
one of the worst rides that I've had.
I know.
Um, in fact, that ride, I started late, and so I missed the rollout, and it's raining. So I'm just rolling, soggy. I'm just convinced I'm never going to see anyone. And I get over past Cloverdale. I'm in the Anderson Valley. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
And finally a group catches me, and turns out they stopped at the campsite. I rolled past. They caught up to me. So we end up doing the rest of the ride together. And I'm in the middle on the way back. It's nighttime. We're eating, and I bite into a veggie dog, and my tooth snaps off.
Oh
And I'm
God.
just like,
Yeah.
oh no. And so I ride the rest of the ride with this, hee haw tooth missing. Just, that's when like
To add to the
kind of,
misery, basically. Yeah.
yeah, the darkness sneaks in. And
Yeah.
because of like wet clothes and whatever, I'm starting to get sores, and it's just such a bummer. I was so glad to be done that day. So going into PvP, I thought, all right, so best case scenario, I get a low of A, get a little bit of B. Okay. So I told myself to go at a pace that felt good. I wanted to get in the mid 60s. I
Okay.
figured that was possible because I think even Mendocino 6, I think we did that just outside of 25 hours. So
Amazing.
cumulative,
Yeah.
you know, not bad. Um, I also, food is such an important thing. I'm vegan, so I knew that that would be a challenge. So uh, I've been kind of like working on things to make and eat that are relatively easy. So I made a bunch of these like little torpedo subs that was speculoos, jam,
Mhm.
and salt.
Yeah.
I made a
Okay.
bunch. I basically stuffed my frame bag full of them. And then I had this drink mix that was a combination of this like caffeine thing and some scratch. And I referred to it as my slurry. And
So,
so I would I would eat the torpedoes until I got tired. Then I would start working on the carb slurry because I knew it'd be easy to digest.
yeah.
And so yeah,
Uh,
food and writing were like two separate tactics.
and Fergus, was there any food options at all at the controls for a vegan?
Yeah, I mean, I jokingly referred to eating a pile of white because I could eat the potatoes and I could eat the pasta. And then they had this like vegetable soup,
Yes.
gru
Yeah.
gruel, right?
Yeah.
They would pour that on top of my pile of white served with the bread, and then I would take mustard for flavor and squirt as
Yeah.
much of that on there.
Yeah.
And at the time, I just thought it was the most delicious thing in the world, and I could
I
never
did
get
too.
enough.
I did too. Yeah, like I'm vegetarian, right? And
Hmm.
yeah, honestly, I think the food's great because it's just the type of food you want, isn't that right? Like just potatoes and bread. I know you
Yeah,
can't eat. Yeah,
get it down the
so
gullet.
yeah,
In retrospect, I wish I was smart enough to realize I was in a town that had a grocery store or a restaurant and just go there. It wasn't until I was on the way back in, and I think it was Tintiniac or something. There's like a
yeah.
Pizza Hut, and Pizza Hut has a vegan option in Europe. And so I was like, screw this. I got my stamp, went straight to Pizza Hut,
Love
ate a whole pizza in
it.
front like a total psycho, and then got back on my bike.
That's
Um,
great. That's funny.
yeah.
And tell me about sleep. Had you planned sleep before going, or was that sort of you sleep as along the way?
Um, I hadn't planned for it. Um, uh, that's a great question. I don't know what's wrong with me. I never thought about it because both sixes I didn't sleep. I just rolled through, you
Wow.
know.
Okay.
And so, like leading up to PBP, so I started in the C group, right? So we start in the afternoon. Had I been smart, I would have slept and tried to sleep all day, but I was so excited and keyed up and like seeing
Yes,
people,
it's
like,
impossible to sleep. Yeah.
dude, the FOMO. And so yeah, I was just awake. And, that caught up to me real quick. Um, and, kind of coming from like the racy messenger alley cat background, when they say go, I'm like, oh, we're going.
Completely. Yeah.
And the rollout was so fast that I was like, oh, this is kind of like a road race. Like,
Yeah.
and um, it wasn't until like, I forget where I was, but it was the afternoon the next day. And I thought, oh, I could just nap. So I pulled over to a shady spot and, and just napped underneath a tree. And I just thought, oh, this is so wonderful. Like,
Yes.
this is the most idyllic, you know, moment that I could have. Like, again, French countryside. It's
Yeah.
glorious. It's beautiful. And I'm napping underneath this tree. Like,
Wonderful. Yeah. It's
yeah.
great.
But um, no, I hadn't planned for sleep to answer your question. And
Yeah.
I think when I do it again, I'll be more comfortable to say, I'm going to nap here.
Smart. Did
Yeah.
you have any dark moments?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot, but from the get-go, my tracker didn't work. And so when I would stop at controls and I was making stories just to check in and people would message me and be like, "Hey, it says you haven't started."
Okay.
So that was a bummer, but I wasn't too worried because I was getting the stamps, right?
Yeah.
And then it was what's the deal? It was past Ludiac. It was like this secret control or something. Anyway, I went to pull out my control card and I couldn't find it.
Oh, oh
I was
God.
like maybe, 500K in. I couldn't find it. And I had a system, right? Like card card comes out of Ziploc bag, stamp immediately back into Ziploc bag into bar bag, right?
Yep.
Every control was like that. I thought, oh man, it's not here. It must be at the last control. So I turned around, something like 70K. Whoop, turn around, go back. Get to that control. I'm stupid. I don't speak French.
Yeah.
They're in France. They don't speak English. And they're like, and I'm like, it'd be funny if it wasn't me. I'm like pantomiming, like how? And they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find it. I looked through the trash. I went looked through the bathroom. I
Oh
looked on the road.
gosh.
I couldn't find it. And finally, they're like, all right, well, here's another control card. They write this note and then they stamp it. And I get back on the road and I just thought, they aren't going to accept my finish.
Yeah.
They're going to,
Yeah.
even though, like, the next control, they read this, Faulkner-esque piece about
Yeah.
how I lost my card and they just
Yes.
shrug and stamp
Yes.
it.
In French, this
Um,
guy motions a lot. He uses his hands. We're not sure what he's saying, but we're just going to write something. Yeah.
this poor bastard. Yeah. And so I just, oh man, that's when everything just
Yeah.
crumbled.
Yeah.
And, I try to explain to people that, like, with endurance sports, I'm sure runners get this too, and um, the mind becomes fragile. Like, it's just strong enough to tell the body, keep going. But if something happens, everything falls apart. And I
Very
was
funny.
just falling apart. And, at Ludiac where I dropped the bag, I thought, okay, I can make it to Brest and back by X time, so I can leave my warm clothes here, and I won't have to ride through the night. I'll sleep in Ludiac. And, the control card threw off my time. And so then I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm not going to make the time. And then then I started getting sores, it was awful. And so I was like, this is painful. Okay, and I'm like by myself, a
Yeah.
good like
Not,
75%
yeah.
of that is by myself. I'm like dropping into Brest, and I just start rationalizing to myself, like, oh, my friends will accept it's okay that I quit. They'll understand that I quit.
Oh, God.
You know,
Yeah.
People will say it's okay.
Yeah.
And I just want to quit so bad. And I was miserable, and I was like crying, and I was like, fuck, 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 fuck. And I get to Brest, and I realize that I'm not going to make it back before sundown. And basically, all I have is a wind vest. I have a base layer, a jersey, and arm warmers. And it,
Yes.
it gets chilly at night in those
Very, very.
gullies.
That year was so cold. Yeah.
Yeah, like you go from like some of the hottest up at
Yeah.
the plateau, you go into the gullies, and it's freezing. And I'm like, man, I'm screwed. And in Brest, I ran into Theo Gougly. I can't pronounce his last name, but
Yeah.
SF Randur. And that dude he was just like, "Hey, it's
Yeah.
great to see you. How you doing?" Like he was really stoked, and
Yeah.
I was just like letting like his rays of like joy and excitement
Yes.
just
Yeah.
thaw me out. And he goes, "Hey, let's ride together." I thought, okay,
Okay.
and he's people, the people on the side of the road clapping. He's always like, "Merci, merci," blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and like in my brain, I'm like, this fucking dude's so happy. Like, what's he fucking happy about? But
Yeah.
then it like kind of warmed me. I was like, oh, I'm so glad he's here. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, thank you. So that, man, I owe him a huge thanks. I actually haven't
So funny.
seen him since PvP, but
Yeah.
he really, whether he meant to or not, got me out that
Yeah.
really dark,
You
dark spot.
Fergus, what you say, like the human mind just has enough of positivity to keep you moving forward. And if anything goes wrong, it can go very dark very quickly. Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's crazy.
100%.
Yeah.
And then, I get back to Ludiac eventually, and I'm, changing my clothes. I'm going through my bar bag, resetting all my food.
Oh, no.
There's my fucking control card
Oh,
in my bar bag where it's supposed to be. And
yeah.
and then it happened all over again. I'm like, I'm so dumb. How did I miss this? Why wasn't this there?
Yeah.
I was glad that I had it, but
Yeah. Fergus, you're very
oh
hard on
man,
yourself, I've decided. Okay? You should be nicer to yourself, okay?
it's my
Uh,
upbringing.
okay. Nice. Oh, I know. Believe me, I know. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Um, great. Any other observations from PBP, your last PBP? Anything else you want to share?
Um.
Actually, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do we talk about this already? But just the other bikes of PBP. I think you'd
Oh
mentioned
yeah.
like there's a great diversity there. But anything interesting?
I loved it. Like I. I don't know what it is with the French and the Japanese, but they really love each other, and so like seeing these like Japanese folks like on these French randonneur bikes, like
Yeah.
these traditional like 650B, like everything looks perfect. Um, I love that stuff. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, I remember being behind this old guy, y- that he could barely get on his bike. He must have been like his late 70s, but he's on this Merckx rim brake. carbon bike with 23 mil tires, and he just, riding behind him, his legs are just like corded steel, just like.
Yeah.
And the guys I was with uh, Mark and Ollie, and we're just like, wow, this guy's like going for it, And it's like that was really kind of amazing to me. Those kinds of things really stuck out. I I'm such a bike nerd, so stoked to see all these different types of bikes. Um,
Yeah.
I saw a few Ritcheys, which, I was like, oh, sick,
So cool. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. Um,
What about the supporters, people on the side of the road, volunteers? Any observations there?
Dude, I can't. We got we People talk about it, right? They'll be like, hey, people are on the side of the road. They're very welcoming. They're supporting you. Okay, that is like underselling it
Yeah.
to an umpteenth degree because it's just wild, like it's so cool, like in the middle of the night seeing some dude in a lawn chair kicking it and we ride by, he's like, all right, like, okay. Or
Yeah.
like that I just thought was so fantastic, and I can't sing the praises of that enough. It was so amazing and
Agreed.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And I
Agreed.
remember, I guess it was my second, third day or something, or another third afternoon. And I'm riding along and I see this dude, he's got blue jeans, a tank top. He's leaned up against what looks like a 280Z, and he's like
Yeah.
there. And I see him look at me and just
Amazing. Yeah.
like,
Yeah. That's crazy.
this is the same
Yeah.
guy that probably beat me up in the bar, but on a bike and he's cheering me on.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's,
really loved
yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's remarkable, especially because, your whole life has been bikes, and then you come to this place where they just love cyclists. They love the event. It's part of their culture. It's really special.
Yeah, I'm used to like people being mad at me on
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
even when I was a bike messenger and delivering paychecks to people, they're like, thanks, motherfucker. Like these people are like, you're random. Great for you. And I'm like,
That's funny.
wow, okay. Uh,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay, so $1 million question. Are you going to do it again?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Feeling like a little stressed because even though it's like 3 years out, my arc for doing it, kind of started in the pandemic, right? Because there's no racing, there's nothing going on. All I had to do was ride. So I was riding more and more and more and more, and I realized, oh, like next PBP is around the corner.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
go for it. And so I had all this fitness uh, from that, and then I joined up with the Randonneur SF Randonneurs. I did my pre-qualifiers, right? Because you gotta pre-qualify, then qualify,
Yeah.
and then yeah. So I had this like huge ramp up. Um, so now I'm like, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like I feel like I'm behind, and
Yeah.
my little like
Exactly.
lizard brain is like, you gotta catch up. Um,
Do you think will there be any different strategy?
yeah, even though I went into it telling myself not to expect anything, at one point during the ride, I was like, oh, I could Charlie Miller. That's sick. I'm gonna do that, you
Yeah.
know. And when that didn't was no longer a possibility, then I was just a failure, and everything sucked. That's why when I finished, I was like, oh, I suck.
Yeah.
But then I realized, like, wait a second. I told myself I wanted to get mid 60s for my first PBP, and I did exactly that. Like, oh, okay. So, yeah, what I would do differently is I would be more okay with stopping. I'd be more okay with, oh, bad things happen,
Yeah.
and just telling myself, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of relaxing more, right? Because that first time it's really beautiful and exciting. Um, so it's easy
Yeah.
to get washed away in it.
So that's what I felt with my second one. I was almost like correcting all the things that I messed up in the first one. And, for the
Yeah.
most part, it was a very different experience. And yeah, but I'm going back next time as well.
You rode the really rainy
So
one,
it's
right?
2019. It was really cold at night. There was a little bit of rain, but not too much. And then
Uh-huh.
2023 was just very, very hot during the day. So I really haven't had much rain, no. But that would
Mm,
change things dramatically, I would imagine. Yeah.
yeah, I heard the failure rate was like really high that really
Yeah.
rainy year, but I thought 19 was supposed to be pretty.
Cool. Do we think we're
Yeah.
going to ride the same bike next time? Or are we going to come up with another bicycle? You should have a new bike every 4 years. That's what I'm thinking.
Um, maybe
Yeah.
I will. I really liked riding that bike, and I got to do so many cool rides in Europe while I was over there on
Yeah.
on that bike. Um, for my own ego, it was cool showing up to like gravel rides and people seeing that bike and being like,
So
"Who's
cool.
this
Yeah.
idiot?" And afterwards, them like patting me on the back, like, "I can't believe you did that!" Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but I had this bishop that Chris made for me that I got made for vase, and it would be it would be cool to take it to France, and
Yeah.
uh, have it do what it's supposed to do. But I'd be
That's cool.
devastated if something bad happened to it. So maybe something that's a little bit more disposable. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I find that transporting a bike is so stressful. I had this old Calfee. I did my first one on, and I
Hmm.
thought it was indestructible. It was actually a carbon frame, not even a Calfee. So from before,
Hmm.
and I broke the seat stay on the way home, which, I think it's just, anyway. Cool. Well, Fergus, this has been great. Now we're going to end with 3 tips that guarantee a finish, okay? Right. And as I tell everyone, they're going to come looking for you if things go wrong, okay?
Oh, okay.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. 3 tips. Uh, eating is as important, if not more important, than writing. So really, when people ask about vervees, I tell them that it's really about eating and having you really got to learn your body and learn your schedule. It's impossible to eat too much, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, it's impossible to eat too much if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Um, so that's key. Getting very used to that. People have also asked me about how to do a brevet or how to get into it, and the advice I give them is the same advice that my friend Pat Gaffney gave me when I asked him. He said, "I just keep pedaling."
Okay.
I was like, but he's right because like let's say you're starting from scratch, right? Like you're a casual commuter and you're like, I
Yeah.
want to do PvP. You just do what you can. You bite off what you can, and it gets better and better. So you just keep pedaling,
Okay.
and that's huge. And I think the last bit of advice is it's okay, which sounds mundane, but I think just being able to say like it's okay, if something bad happens or if it's just like, oh, what a bummer that occurred. Yeah, it's okay. Being able to try to shrug it off because it really is easy to just get stuck in that mire of, you know,
Completely.
deprivation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think those are my top three.
Perfect. Extremely helpful.
Yeah.
Fergus, it's been a real pleasure. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you. No, pleasure is mine. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.